There was a talented musician named Elton who performed every night at a small local concert, playing his violin. Despite his skill, his arrogant attitude didn't help him progress in his music career. He believed his talent was sufficient to achieve success and refused to learn from others. Elton always presented himself with an air of superiority, looking at the audience as if he was doing them a favor by playing. His violin produced incredible music, but his personality pushed people away. He dreamed of playing on grand stages and being recognized worldwide, but his actions were keeping him stuck in a cycle of mediocrity. However, something was about to happen in his life that would make him rethink his approach to music and life. While Elton continued his nightly performance routine with his violin, he began to notice a frequent spectator. Every night, there he was, an elderly homeless man named Henry. Henry was a kind man, but his worn appearance and tough life on the streets sharply contrasted with Elton's arrogance. Elton couldn't understand why someone like Henry would attend his performances every night. Instead of being touched by the man's constant presence, he treated him with coldness and arrogance, as he did with everyone else. One night, after finishing his performance, Elton noticed Henry once again in the audience, applauding timidly. Irritated by the homeless man's persistence, Elton approached him and condescendingly asked, "Why do you keep coming here every night, Henry? Don't you have a better place to be?" Henry, despite Elton's rude demeanor, maintained a gentle smile and humbly replied, "Your music brings me a comfort I can't find anywhere else, my young friend. It reminds me of better times." Henry's words struck a chord in Elton's heart, but he was still blinded by his own arrogance. Instead of recognizing the beauty in the connection that could be formed, Elton turned his back on Henry and walked away, leaving the homeless man alone in the dark night. Elton continued his nightly performances with his violin, but his arrogant attitude continued to alienate him from the audience and obscure the true magic of music. Meanwhile, Henry remained a persistent spectator, eager for something that Elton was taking a long time to grasp: that music could be a bridge to compassion and empathy regardless of one's social status. Time passed, and Elton continued his nightly performances with his violin. Despite his arrogance, he couldn't completely ignore Henry's constant presence in the audience. Every night, when he finished his performance, he saw Henry sitting on the theater steps, applauding timidly. However, Elton still maintained his distant attitude. One afternoon, while Elton was walking through the city streets, he spotted Henry begging for money from passers-by. This deeply bothered him, as if Henry's presence was haunting him even outside the theater. Then, he had an idea. Instead of ignoring Henry, he approached him and handed him some bills. "You're always here at my concerts," Elton said, his voice still carrying a hint of condescension. "Maybe this can buy you a ticket, and you can watch a real performance." Henry accepted the money with gratitude, but instead of responding with resentment, he said with a serene smile, "Thank you very much, Elton. Maybe one day, I'll use this money for something more than just a ticket." Henry's words lingered in Elton's mind as he returned home that night. He began to reflect on his own attitudes and how he had treated Henry over time. Why had he been so arrogant? Why couldn't he understand what Henry saw in his music? Elton began to feel uncomfortable with himself and the direction his life was taking. He realized that music was not just a quest for success, but a way to connect with others and touch their hearts. Deep down, he knew he was missing something important. Determined to change, Elton started practicing his violin with renewed passion, not just to showcase his talent, but to share the beauty of music with everyone, regardless of who they were. He knew he had a long way to go to redeem his past attitudes, but the first step towards humility and compassion had been taken. Despite his brief reflection on his actions, Elton was still far from fully understanding the meaning of humility and compassion. He continued his nightly performances, but Henry's constant presence disturbed him more than ever. On a particularly hectic night, Elton spotted Henry near the theater entrance. As always, irritated by Henry's persistent presence and frustrated with his own inability to understand what it meant, he lost his patience. "That's enough, Henry," Elton exclaimed, his voice filled with anger. "I don't want you here. Leave and don't come back." Henry, surprisingly calm in the face of Elton's outburst, slowly stood up and began to walk away, with a sad and resigned look. He moved away, disappearing into the night. Elton felt a mixture of relief and guilt as he turned his attention back to that night's performance, but something inside him had changed. He realized that his anger and arrogance had hurt someone who, somehow, saw something special in his music regardless of his attitude. As he played that night, the sound of Elton's violin resonated within him differently. He wondered if he had missed something essential in his pursuit of success. The idea of Henry, despite his appearance and life circumstances, somehow appreciating his music both intrigued and deeply disturbed him. Elton's behavior began to be questioned by his friends and fellow musicians who noticed the change in his attitude. He was at a crossroads, struggling to reconcile his passion for music with his need for personal change. Elton knew that, to move forward, he would need to find a way to redeem himself and perhaps reconnect with the man he had expelled from his life. Days passed after the incident in which Elton had ejected Henry from one of his performances. The musician was at a crossroads, wrestling with his own arrogance and ambition. He was still fixated on the idea that his music should be appreciated by high society, not a homeless man. Success had blinded him to the true essence of music. The day after that tragic event, Elton left the theatre, still disturbed by what had happened. As he exited, he spotted Henry again, asking for money from passers-by. However, something had changed. Henry's gaze was sad but also seemed hopeful. Elton, a talented violinist, had a backstory that many didn't know. He had once been homeless himself. This challenging phase of his life was a dark and deeply personal part of his journey. However, this experience shaped his worldview and paradoxically also contributed to his annoyance with homeless individuals. There was a reason why Elton got so bothered when he saw someone begging for money to buy tickets to his concerts. When he was a homeless teenager, he went through tough times, struggling to survive on the unforgiving streets of the city. He had painful memories of hunger, cold, and rejection. It was a period when life seemed utterly devoid of hope. It all began when Elton was just a teenager, after a series of unfortunate circumstances left him homeless. He lost his family and the shelter he had once called home. With no support whatsoever, he found himself on the cold and unforgiving city streets, where survival was a daily battle. Elton vividly remembered the nights when he huddled in dark corners, trembling from cold and hunger. People walked past him, looking on with indifference or, worse yet, disdain. He felt invisible, a lost and neglected soul in a bustling crowd. It was during these desperate moments that Elton had an encounter that would change his life forever. He met an elderly man named Leroy, who was also homeless but had a violin. The instrument was worn, but it still produced a melody that touched Elton's heart. One day, Leroy approached Elton and offered him the violin. He saw something special in the young homeless man, something that made him believe that music could be the key to a better life. Elton accepted the violin with gratitude and began to practice tirelessly, using his music as a means to escape the hardships of street life. Over time, music became the light at the end of the tunnel for Elton. He realized he had exceptional talent and was determined to develop it. He began playing on the streets to earn some money and eventually caught the attention of a professional musician who helped him refine his skills. Elton's life started to improve, but he never forgot the hardships he faced when he was homeless. He became a successful musician but carried the memory of his experience on the streets with him. So, when he saw someone asking for money to buy tickets to his concerts, his annoyance was a reaction to the painful memories of his own journey. Now, Elton was in a different place in his life. He had improved his circumstances but remained arrogant. He wanted to forget what he had been through, and that homeless man reminded him of his past. Thus, Elton's annoyance with homeless people was gradually replaced by empathy and understanding. He knew that his own journey had made him who he was today, and he was determined to touch the hearts of everyone, regardless of their circumstances, always remembering that music had the power to bring people together and offer hope even in the darkest times. Elton's success in music was not just a personal achievement, but also a way to inspire others to overcome obstacles and pursue their passions with humility and compassion. His music now served as a beacon of hope and transformation, a reminder that personal growth could be found in the most unlikely situations, like a gentle melody amid the chaos of the streets. Moved by compassion and a desire for redemption, Elton approached Henry after his performance. This time, his voice was filled with remorse and humility. "I'm so sorry, Henry," Elton said sincerely. "I was wrong to treat you poorly. I forgot where I came from and how my life changed because someone believed in me." Henry looked at Elton with surprise, but a shy smile formed on his lips. "We all make mistakes, my young friend. The important thing is to acknowledge those mistakes and try to do the right thing." Elton then invited Henry to join him at a nearby diner. He paid for a hot meal for the homeless man, and the two shared a meaningful conversation while savoring the food. Elton learned about Henry's life, his struggles, and his hopes, and he began to understand the value of touching everyone's heart regardless of their position in society. This encounter changed Elton profoundly. He realized that music should not be a means of exclusion but a way of unity and compassion. From that day on, he started performing in more accessible places for all people, not just for high society. Elton's music began to be heard and appreciated by a diverse audience, and he finally found meaning and happiness in his musical journey. After the heartfelt conversation with Henry at the diner, Elton felt a sense of relief and redemption he had never experienced before. He realized that, more important than the audience who chose to enjoy his music, was the human connection and compassion it could generate. That night, after his performance, Elton eagerly waited for Henry's presence, but the homeless man wasn't there. Elton worried, thinking that maybe Henry was going through a tough time or had decided to move on with his life. Days turned into weeks, and Elton continued his performances. However, Henry's absence always weighed on his mind. He wondered if he had done something to drive away the man who had been such an important part of his journey of self-discovery. Finally, after many nights of anticipation and concern, Elton realized that Henry wouldn't return. He felt sad and lonely without the presence of the homeless man who had played such a significant role in his transformation journey. He understood that Henry was a true fan of his work. As Elton continued his performances with a new perspective, he was surprised by an unexpected event. During one of his performances, a well-dressed and elegant man caught his attention in the audience. Elton didn't recognize the man, but his presence deeply intrigued him. After the concert, the man approached Elton with a warm smile. "You play wonderfully, Elton. My name is Henry," he said, extending his hand. Elton shook Henry's hand, completely shocked and moved. "Henry, the homeless man. I can't believe what I'm seeing." Henry gently laughed and explained, "Yes, it's me. I used to dress like this as a test. I wanted to see who you really were, if your transformation was genuine. Most musicians here are arrogant and don't look at ordinary people. But you, Elton, proved to be different." Elton was stunned, feeling a mixture of surprise and gratitude. He shared his journey of self-discovery and how his encounter with Henry had transformed him. He admitted that he had been arrogant before but was now committed to sharing his music with everyone, regardless of their social status. Henry listened attentively and, in the end, said, "Elton, I'm impressed by your story and your music. Your humility and passion for music are your greatest qualities." Elton was thrilled and grateful to have reconnected with his unexpected friend and mentor. Henry then revealed that he had connections in the music industry and could help Elton advance his career significantly. In this unlikely encounter, Elton learned that success in music wasn't just about talent but also about humility and passion. He understood that his journey of self-improvement was far from over, but now he was on the right path to achieve his dreams, sharing his music with the world in a more meaningful way than he had ever imagined, thanks to Henry's support and guidance. With Henry's help and guidance, Elton began to forge a new path in his musical career. His music was now genuinely accessible to all people, and he was eager to share it with the world. Sometime later, Henry brought exciting news to Elton. He had secured an opportunity for Elton to perform in a prestigious music piece in Barcelona. Elton was surprised and honored to be invited to such an important international stage. Upon receiving the news, Elton immediately accepted the opportunity. He knew this would be his chance to showcase to the world the music he had found on his journey of self-discovery, a music that came from the heart and touched the souls of all. Elton performed in Barcelona with passion and humility, sharing his music with an international audience. His performance was acclaimed and received a standing ovation, and he felt that he was finally fulfilling his dream of playing on grand stages and being recognized for what he was, a talented and compassionate musician. At the end of the concert, Elton looked out at the grateful audience and remembered Henry, the man who had helped him see the true essence of music. He knew that this achievement would not have been possible without Henry's compassion and support, which had profoundly and significantly transformed his life. Back home, Elton continued his musical journey, inspiring people not only with his exceptional music but also with his humility and compassion. He understood that true triumph lay in touching people's hearts, regardless of where they came from or their circumstances. And so, Elton's story became an example of overcoming adversity, humility, and compassion, reminding all of us that, no matter how talented we may be, it is how we treat others that truly defines our success and achievements in life. Thank you.